I'm Assemblymember Rebecca Bauer-Kahan. Thanks for joining us for this LGBTQ plus Pride Month Assembly District 16 chat. We're here to celebrate Pride in June and recognize and celebrate our beautifully diverse community of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, and intersex individuals. The sexual orientation and gender identity of our community is truly as diverse as the rainbow. It's also time for us to educate, create supportive spaces where people can be together as their authentic selves, and for us to reinvigorate the movement for LGBTQ plus equality. There is still so much misinformation and animosity targeted towards our LGBTQ plus community, and we're seeing a wave of anti-LGBTQ plus legislation and a ratcheting up of transphobic and homophobic rhetoric across the country, and even, as we know, a rise of incidents here in California, including our own beloved Bay Area. So we want to have a little conversation, and we're going to end with positivity. Don't worry. I've invited a few guests who are on the forefront of working for LGBTQ rights here in California to be with me to discuss their thoughts on Pride and their efforts to advance justice for LGBTQ plus people. First, I'm very excited to have with me my colleague, Senator Scott Wiener from the 11th Senate District in San Francisco and a member of the LGBTQ plus Legislative Caucus. Welcome, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
Also joining us is Sam Garrett-Pate, Director of External Affairs for Equality California. Hi, Sam. Welcome from Los Angeles.
Hi, thank you.
And lastly, we have Robin Kuslitz, Board President for the Rainbow Community Center. The Rainbow Community Center is a local LGBTQ plus center located in Concord. And the Rainbow Community Center is a voice for change in our community and provides important services for LGBTQ plus people, youth, seniors, and everyone in between. And I don't think I said what Equality California did I, Sam?
Maybe not.
So let me make sure everybody knows. Equality California works to advance LGBTQ plus civil rights at all levels of government and is a critical voice for change here in our state and in Sacramento. They have been a partner of mine, and I know of the senators many times on important legislation that we move to advance LGBTQ plus rights. So we'll start with you, Sam. Right now, we're seeing a rise in anti-LGBTQ plus legislation across the country. Can you share a little bit about the current landscape of rights out there and give everyone a context about where we are in this moment?
Well, sure. And, thank you again for having me. Really honored to be here with you and with Senator Wiener and with Robin for such an important discussion. We are in sort of this inflection point for the community where last year we saw a record number of anti-LGBTQ legislation in state capitals across the country. This year, we broke that record, not a record that you want to break. But unfortunately, we're at this point where far-right anti-LGBTQ extremists see an opportunity to use our community as this political football. Especially in the years that President Trump was in office, they saw opportunities to exploit fear and misinformation and attack communities, whether it's the LGBTQ community or Jewish communities, communities of color, immigrants. They saw this opportunity to exploit traditionally marginalized communities for political gain. And we've only seen that increase even as the former president has left office. And so what we see right now is this toxic combination of misinformation about the community, combined with this really hateful rhetoric coming from TV hosts on Fox News or politicians in states across the country. And then unfortunately, it's making its way into legislation. And so whether it's the Don't Say Gay bill that most people have heard of in Florida, which prohibited schools from even acknowledging the existence of LGBTQ people, or the actions of the governor in Texas to essentially label the parents of trans kids child abusers, which was then followed by legislation in other states across the country, including Alabama, which criminalized just providing kids with gender-affirming care, life-saving care. This is what we're up against. And, in recent weeks, we've seen that combination of hateful rhetoric and hateful legislation now leading to violence toward the LGBTQ community. Obviously, as a community, we've experienced hate crimes and violence before, but you are seeing really targeted violence, including in Alameda County. And so it's this dangerous moment for the community, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you. I remember so distinctly dancing in the streets of San Francisco when gay marriage was legalized across the country, and knowing that we weren't done with the fight for equality, but I don't think at the time I could have predicted where we'd be today. And it's really incredibly tragic that we are where we are. We have so much more work ahead of us. And so, it's really been an honor to stand beside Senator Wiener to support him in his work, because obviously what you just talked about, Sam, regarding legislation across this country really makes it imperative that California steps up and protects everyone. And Senator, I know you are absolutely leading the way with that, especially with SB 107. Can you share a little bit about that and what it means for youth across the country?
Sure, and I just want to reiterate what Sam said. I've been around for a long time, doing work in the LGBTQ community for 32 years now, and I started off at a really scary time in the late 80s, early 90s, when there were really no civil rights protections pretty much anywhere, and HIV was being basically ignored by our federal government, and people were dying, and we were sort of abandoned as a community. And we, after that, things started looking better, and culturally and politically, and started having a lot more wins and feeling like we were only moving in one direction. And we know that with any civil rights movement that's really challenging fundamental status quo, there can be a backlash, and we're really experiencing a backlash. And Donald Trump accelerated it and opened the Pandora's box, but it was always there, and it's a very, very scary time. And so when we look at the basically incitement to violence that we're seeing from high-ranking politicians who are so cynical that they'll just do anything to advance their political career, even on the backs of children, or we see people with broad social media followings who target individuals to incite violence against them, it's very scary. So SB 107 is trying to respond to one of the specific attacks on our community, and specifically the laws and proposals we're seeing to ban gender-affirming care, to classify it as child abuse, to say if a parent allows their kid to receive, their trans kid to receive gender-affirming care, the kid will be put in foster care, the parents will be put in prison, and the doctor will be put in prison. It's a year ago, I would never predicted that happening, but that's where we are. And so we built on work that you and others in the Women's Caucus have done around abortion and the terrifying situation with Roe apparently prepared to be overruled. And so we borrowed ideas that you put in your legislation, that Assemblymember Mia Bonta has put in legislation, to say that if you have a family that lives in Texas or Alabama or wherever else that does not feel safe remaining in their states because they think their kid's going to be taken away or they're going to be criminalized, they can come to California, and we're going to do everything in our power to shield them and to make sure that they're not going to be pulled back into their state and criminalized or have the kid taken away. And so the legislation does a few things. It provides that we're not going to enforce those laws. We're just not going to apply them in our courts. We're not going to honor subpoenas from those states. And when I say we're not going to enforce those laws, I mean those particular laws banning gender-affirming care and classifying it as child abuse. We're not going to honor subpoenas for records relating to civil cases or criminal prosecutions under those laws. And we're banning our law enforcement from enforcing those laws or cooperating in terms of enforcing court orders from those states, et cetera. So it's never going to be perfect because the U.S. Constitution does put some limits on our ability to do this, but we're going as far as we can go. And I think the law will make it very hard for those laws to impact people who have come to California seeking refuge.
Thank you for that work. And I hope, I mean, I know that it will hopefully not only protect people in its application, but I know doing that work really sends the message to people across the country that we in California have their backs. And that's also critically important.
Yeah, and that's a really important point because, you know, apart from the legalities, when these LGBTQ kids, you know, they're not living in a cave, right? They're on the internet, they're on social media, they see the news, and they see that this is happening, and they see not just random people, but governors and U.S. senators and members of Congress saying these horrible things about them, calling them scam artists, saying because of who you are, we're putting you in foster care and putting your parents in jail. And the psychological message that sends to these kids is horrifying. And it isn't any wonder that we have high rates of attempts of self-harm and suicide among LGBTQ youth. It's higher than among other youth. And so just sending that message that, okay, there are other powerful people who do have your backs, who think this is wrong, who want to help you and affirm you and protect you, that sends a very positive message.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that's actually a great segue into Robin and the work you do at the Rainbow Community Center, because I know you do incredible work every day serving our LGBTQ plus community, and in a lot of the ways that the senator just mentioned are needed for our youth and others. So can you talk about, you know, what the services of highest need are in the community and what you guys are doing, Robin?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me and inviting me. I'm grateful to be here. I could talk about Rainbow's services and programs all day, but we serve all of Contra, Costa County and beyond. And I'm going to focus on really two areas. Our mental health programming and services is in really desperate need of more capacity. People are reaching out for help at higher levels than we've ever seen before. And so we're really looking to increase our capacity to be able to meet those needs. And most of our therapists as well are members of the community also. So they're dealing with all these things we've been talking about in addition to serving our community as well. So they're having a really tough time, and they're doing, you know, everything they can to meet the needs of the community. But they do need some help, and our community really needs help in the mental health area. The other program I wanted to bring up is our housing program, particularly for transitional age youth. As a young person turns 18, they get to leave their house for the first time. They're an adult, and they get to finally be able to embrace who they are, finally, if their parents aren't supportive. And unfortunately, with the rising cost of living, it's really hard to find housing, particularly anywhere in the Bay Area. The cost of housing is so expensive, and the general cost of living, food prices are going up, everything. So our housing program is really hoping to address that, but the need is so great. It's just so hard to meet all of the needs of our community. So we're really always looking for all the help we can get.
That's such important work. I know that both of those issues, mental health and housing, are top of mind for so many of our communities. But to your point, I think it's really critical that you're there to serve this vulnerable community. And Senator Wiener, I know you're doing work on culturally competent trans inclusive care through your SB 923. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. The healthcare system has always been a challenge for members of the LGBTQ community in terms of being judged and having providers who may really get it or who don't get it, and so people, you know, sometimes being treated in disrespectful ways, in ways that make you not necessarily want to go back and seek care. And for members of the trans community and people who are gender non-conforming and intersex, it's even more pronounced. It's hard for TGI people sometimes to even find physicians who or providers who know about how to provide culturally competent care for TGI people or gender affirming care. You know, we want to make sure that it's a better experience. And so SB 923 does a couple of things. First, it requires that as part of continuing medical education, there be an integration of a TGI component, just so we make sure that that providers have just a baseline of knowledge about how to appropriately interact with TGI people. It also creates a process for creation of sort of standards of behavior, so that we eventually publish what would be first in the nation, just standards in terms of treating TGI people, and then requiring health plans, so when you have health insurance, in their network directory to have a section for providers that have indicated that they work with TGI people, that they know how to do so, provide gender affirming care, et cetera, so that TGI people can look and say, okay, who are the physicians that are going to probably be the best fit for me? So, because I know trans people who've had to just start calling through doctors, and it takes like an enormous amount of time just to find someone who is where this is a focus for them. So we want to make that easier.
I love that. Thank you for that work. I think that's really important and will be helpful for those that follow. So, okay, we're here because of Pride Month, and we've talked a little bit about the state of things, which is not great. And we talked about the work that's being done that will hopefully turn things around, which is great. But let's close with a little bit of pride and what it means to each of you, especially in this moment in time. So, Sam, you want to start?
Sure, happy to. I think inherently pride is a protest, right? It got its start, whether you want to look at Stonewall and the Stonewall riots in New York, or look at out here in California where we had Compton's Cafeteria and the Black Cat. It started as a protest of largely of police violence against the LGBTQ community, and has evolved over the years into a big celebration of our community, of our visibility, of our diversity. But it remains a protest, even as we're having fun in a pride parade and dancing in the streets. Part of what we're doing is showing that we won't be quiet, we won't be silenced, we won't be forced into the closet or forced back into our homes, or forced to hide who we are. So yes, we should have fun, we should see our friends, we should celebrate, especially now as we've come out of a couple of hard years of no large pride celebrations. But we should also all remember that as we're doing that, part of that is to demonstrate our resilience and our resistance to those who would try to silence us or force us back into the closet.
That's great. Thank you. Robin, will you share what pride means to you?
Yeah, kind of going along with what Samuel mentioned, thinking about all the shame that comes with all of these terrible messages coming from across the country with these anti-LGBT legislation all across the country, all the rhetoric all over the place. It causes a lot of shame. And for a lot of people, it may prevent them from coming out at a time that might be opportune for them. So to me, pride is the opposite of shame. And so being able to feel like you're loved, you're worthy, and be proud of who you are, and being able to say loud and proud, I'm here, I'm queer, and I'm not going anywhere. That's to me what pride's about.
That's awesome. Senator, will you close us out?
For me, first of all, it's our first Pride in 3 years, so it's a really important one. And with everything that's happening, the planned attack on Pride in Idaho, the Proud Boys storming the Drag Queen Story Hour in San Lorenzo. I received a lot of death threats, but I got a particularly significant one on Sunday, a threat of a bomb being planted in my home. There are people who are saying, wait, they're like, oh, should we go to Pride? Is it going to be safe? And I think, of course, we all in LGBTQ community has been subjected to violence forever, as long as we existed, which is forever. It used to be that in the 70s and 80s, there were people who would come into the Castro to find gay men and beat us up. So there's always been that danger. And we have to be mindful of safety. And I know our pride parade, and I know all pride parades are very mindful of safety. But it is even more important given all those threats and the attacks, it's even more important for us to have an amazing, huge Pride this year, for everyone to be out there and to be there for each other and to send a clear message that we're not going anywhere, that we are here and you're not getting rid of us. We're not going back in the closet. You're not going to scare us. You're not going to intimidate us. You're not going to bully us. And so now this year, we need to send a very loud message that we're pushing back.
Thank you for that. And I think that you all summed it up so well with, you know, this incredible facing of reality we're in, but also pride, which each of the community members should have. I think it's really important. And I think, you know, Senator, you started by talking about, you know, the history of working in this space for decades. And, you know, we remember before the Pride parades, right? And I think it's really important that we've gotten to this point where, you know, there is marching in the street and there is celebration. And I think that even given the times, and especially given the times, I'm glad we're continuing to do that. So thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts and experience. I am so extraordinarily lucky to get to work with each of you and so many incredible people on the work for LGBTQ+ rights. It's an honor to be in this work at this moment and to be able to do it with all of you. And to our LGBTQ+ community members, I want you to know that we stand with you, we see you, and we fight for you every single day. And to my fellow allies in the community, I want you to remember this Pride and always that allyship calls us to stand up with our LGBTQ+ neighbors, to be active in pushing back on homophobia and transphobia in our community and making it clear that anti-LGBTQ+ hate is unacceptable here. But instead, we stand in pride with our community members who are our neighbors, our friends, and stand alongside each of us every day. So I promise to continue that work in Sacramento. And it is just with these partners that I am able to do it every day. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And thank you all for sharing everything you've shared today. Happy Pride.